Hello and welcome to the Game Day Podcast from talkSPORT with me, Sam Matterface, and we've got Matt Holland and Scott Minto, two Charlton legends in the building this week as we preview all the weekend's action. And what a weekend of action it is live on talkSPORT. We start with the Manchester derby, but we'll also bring you the West London derby between Fulham and Chelsea and keep you updated what's happening in the North London derby. So let's not waste any time. Let's get straight to it on the Game Day Podcast from talkSPORT. Hello, gents. Hope you're all well. I know, Scott, you'll be absolutely on tender hooks waiting for Fulham against Chelsea on Thursday night. How on earth has this become a really key game for Chelsea? I mean, this is a match where Chelsea usually just turn up, beat Fulham, go home. It's all done and dusted within an hour and a half, and no one really worries too much. But I don't think it's going to be as easy as that on Thursday night when we pitch up there.
No, and this is probably one of the worst games that Chelsea could be facing, but we're getting to the stage, Sam, where almost every game is one of the worst games that Chelsea could be facing. When you're going through a bad run, like Graham Potter is, then every game does look more difficult than it could be. But I tell you what, Fulham away, the way Fulham are playing this season, it is a tough one. They will be up for it. I think they will go at Chelsea. And look, you know, I've been sort of defensive of Graham Potter, for a period of time now. And I do think he's had a lot of injuries. I mean, to be double figures in terms of injuries is terrible at any time. He's just come to the club. He's just trying to get his thought pattern over. And he's played Manchester City 3 times, Arsenal, Newcastle, and a few other, Brighton away, which was, obviously they were going to be up for that one. There's almost like the perfect storm, but you can't keep on saying that, it's a difficult game, it's this, then that. They're all difficult, and you've got to somehow find a way. And it will not be easy at Craven Cottage, because I've been really impressed by what the job that Marco Silva's done. And at the moment, he's up there. He's probably just behind Eddie Howe and Mikel Arteta in terms of manager of the season.
Yeah, they lost that Brighton game. They lost that Arsenal game. They lost that Newcastle game. They lost that game against Manchester City. In fact, they lost all 3 games against Manchester City, and they did so without scoring. The truth is that the Chelsea fan base is unsettled, Matt Holland. And what do you do here? I mean, you can sack him if you like. I mean, make it easy for yourself. Sack him, bring in a new coach. Everything will be all right for about 18 months, and the same thing will happen again. Because ultimately, Chelsea's biggest issue is structural issues. And over the last 10 years, they haven't recruited properly. They haven't managed to invest in a manager and build a team. You look at Pep Guardiola, you look at Liverpool with Jurgen Klopp, you look at the way that Arsenal have invested in Mikel Arteta. Surely there's a massive, great big signpost telling you this is how to run your club. Do you agree, or do you think he's out of his depth?
I think you make a really good point about Mikel Arteta and the way that Arsenal have stuck by him through difficult times. There was a period last year when the Arsenal fans were on his back and wanted him out of the football club, and look where they are now. I think you can look to Nottingham Forest a little bit as well with Steve Cooper at the start of the season, where they were, and they made a decision to stick with their manager, and look where they are now, out the relegation zone and giving themselves a chance of staying in the Premier League this season. So I think it's very early to say that Graham Potter should be sacked. He hasn't been in the job very long. I agree that at times he's perhaps over-tinkered. He did that at Brighton. He's changed his formation, he's changed his personnel. I think it's just a case of him getting to know the players that he's got and who fits what he wants them to do. I think Scott makes a great point about Reece James and Ben Chilwell. The win percentage with those two in the side makes a huge difference. And N'Golo Kanté is a big loss in the middle of the pitch as well. But the biggest problem at Chelsea is the lack of goals. 20 goals in 17 Premier League games. It's just not enough for a club of that quality and size.
Scott Minto, looking at the stat, I mean, we all do these sort of like intense stats and data analysis now. In the Premier League, only 3 clubs have had less shots than Chelsea. Now, that's an important statistic. If you speak to anybody who's sort of a big bettor or someone who is analysing data, shot count really matters because it shows a real intent. There's only 3 clubs in the Premier League, Bournemouth, Everton and Nottingham Forest, who have had less shots than Chelsea this season. Less shots than Chelsea. Only 3. That's an outstanding statistic. I mean, you're looking at it, and West Ham have had more shots than Chelsea. Crystal Palace have had more shots than Chelsea this year.
So Southampton must have had as well. I feel your passion, Sam.
Yeah. 205 shots Southampton have had. Chelsea have had 186.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I agree with Matt. They need a striker. They need someone who sticks the ball in the back of the net. And that's not necessarily what João Felix does. He's not a 9, he is a 10. However, the ones who have been creating or supposedly creating this season, the Pulisics, the Ziyechs, even the Mason Mounts, Raheem Sterling, I don't think has really hit the ground running in the Chelsea shirt. No one can actually say in that attacking position that they've been really good this season. So, look, I'm still a big fan of Graham Potter. I like what Todd Bowley's trying to do. I think in the last couple of decades, and I've said this before, the Chelsea fans have almost been programmed that if they fall below the top 6 or even below the top 4, that the manager's going to get sacked. This is a real test for the owners to say, do you know what? This is our guy and we're going to stick with him, because if they don't, then they're setting a bar in terms of exactly what Abramovich has done, and they're going to go from manager to manager when things don't go well. But Sam, you're absolutely right. To win a game, you have to at least shoot, let alone score. And he has to improve that. So, look, he's got to get his players back to fitness. He's got to work a way of, 1, what system he wants, and 2, what players go into that system. And then you're hoping the players that will be fit can actually do the job. But so far, it's a very difficult time, and I'm sure he's learning a lot about himself as well as the players.
In terms of the Fulham game, Sam, he has had a bit of fortune in that Alexander Mitrovic is suspended. So that's one thing that's one thing that's gone Graham Potter's way, because how good a season is he having?
Carlos Vinicius hasn't really pulled up any trees, has he, since sort of deputising whenever he's sort of come into play instead of Mitrovic. 1 win in 8 games in the league for Graham Potter, thrashed by Manchester City in the FA Cup. Only thing to play for really is the Champions League. Good luck with that. And arguably, when you look at the table right now, they're the 3rd best team in West London behind Brentford and Fulham. Friday night sees Aston Villa take on Leeds United. 2 sides coming off the back of 4 FA Cup games. I mean, Villa were knocked out, Matt Holland, by Stevenage.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, how did it happen? Because they were pretty much in control of the game as well, weren't they, with just 5 minutes left. But actually, Unai Emery has done a very good job, hasn't he, since he's arrived at the club. But they were a team that were looking over their shoulder when he arrived, and I don't think that's the case now. I think, all of a sudden they're 7 points away from the relegation zone, whereas, when Steven Gerrard left, they were a little bit closer than that to that relegation zone. So he'll be looking to do some business in January, like all managers, looking to try and bring his own players in. It looks like Alex Moreno's going to be the first one through the door. So he'll be looking to try and bring in a few players of his own, and they'll be looking up rather than down now since Unai Emery came into the building.
Leeds have had a bit of a sticky patch, not particularly restarted well after the World Cup break. They've conceded 14 goals in their last 6 away games, Scott Minto. Is this going to be a high-scoring affair?
Leeds need to be careful. It's no win in 6 now. They somehow got out of being 2-0 down after a terrible first half at Cardiff. And they've got some really important games coming up. They've got Villa away, they've got Cardiff, they've got Brentford at home. If they're not careful, February's not easy either. That they could be really sucked into it. I actually think that they'll be okay. If you really pin me down, you could turn around and say, look, they're one of those teams because of their defensive record that they could get sucked into it. But I think they'll be okay come the end of the season. Comparisons about similar to where Bielsa's Leeds were. I think there's no way the negativity on the pitch like it was under Bielsa. So I think Jesse Marsch, look, I'm not sure he'll ever quite win a certain 100% of the fans over there, Ellen Road, because he followed Bielsa. But I like what he's trying to do, and I think they'll be okay. Do I think there'll be goals in this one? Leeds score, and they concede as well. Having said that, the reason why I don't like to predict is what happened at St James's Park when Leeds went there. I didn't see that being a 0-0. But you would think there'll be goals at both ends in this game.
Yeah, Rodrigo's got 11 goals now, and Wilfried Gnonto looks like a promising player. They've got 17 points, Leeds United, which is the same as Nottingham Forest and Leicester City. That's just 2 points above the relegation zone. Manchester United are in fine fettle. Manchester City aren't doing too bad either. Those two clash live on game day from 11 o'clock on Saturday morning on talkSPORT.
We can compete with every team. Obviously, Man City, when they are on their best, a hard opponent for everyone.
It's poked back to Holland, and Holland gets his second, and Manchester City's third.
I had the feeling that United is coming back. Finally, United is coming back. Why you have to fight to you to qualify for Champions League and fight for the title?
Brilliant finish from Marcus Rashford. Manchester United have turned up the music.
Oh, this is a belter, isn't it? Manchester United against Manchester City, live on talkSPORT, 12:30 on Saturday. We'll have all the build-up from 11 with Reshbin Chowdhury, Stuart Pearce and Mickey Gray will be there with me. Really looking forward to this game. Manchester United have won 8 games in a row since their 3-1 defeat to Aston Villa. Didn't think they were particularly good on Tuesday night against Charlton. Let's have a love-in on Marcus Rashford because he's scored 13 for the season now, the most informed player in the league. I spoke to Tom Heaton about him last night and he says you see it in training, the confidence, the dynamism, the fitness. He is absolutely on fire right now. He's scored in each of the last 8 home games for Manchester United. Is he unstoppable, Matt?
That's what Erik Ten Hag said. He said he's unstoppable at the moment. I think we should credit the manager as well for the turnaround in Marcus Rashford's form. He's playing with confidence. Every time he picks the ball up now, instead of taking the easy option, instead of turning back, instead of passing it simple, he's now looking to affect the game in the final third. He's looking to be positive. He's looking to take people on. He's confident every time he goes forward that he's going to score. He's just in a place now that I haven't seen Marcus Rashford before. Even going back to his debut when he scored those 2 goals against Arsenal, and he's playing with freedom and he's playing with where he's got no weight on his shoulders whatsoever. Right now, we're seeing the very best version of Marcus Rashford. We're seeing exactly why he's been talked about in the past as a player that can really affect things at the very highest level. And I'm enjoying watching him. I'm enjoying watching every time he picks the ball up because I think something's going to happen. And he's in a really good place at the moment. It's good watching United and the way that they're playing right now. I mean, every decision that Erik Ten Hag has made has proved to be the right one. And I think we have to credit the manager for the way that Rashford's playing right now.
Yeah, and he's an interesting character, Erik Ten Hag. I asked him whether or not he felt that Manchester United had done enough to build from where they were when they last played Manchester City, when they lost 6-3 earlier in the season. And those processes and systems that he keeps banging on about, those standards that he keeps talking about, the building of the team that he continually mentions, have done enough to be able to make them competitive with Manchester City on Saturday, because they weren't competitive the last time these two met. It wasn't that long ago. And he said to me, we can compete with any team in the world. I don't know if it's just bravado. I don't know if he's just trying to talk his team up, Scott, but he certainly believes that on Saturday they can do something. They'll have to play better than they did against Charlton, but there'll be a lot of changes and influential personnel that come into the team on Saturday lunchtime.
Yeah, there will be a lot of changes, Sam, and I agree with Matt. With the job that he's done since he's coming. When you go back to the Brentford game, and he must have been thinking, "Wow, what am I doing here? I'm turning around the Titanic." I think it's great to see Rashford's back. He's in a happy place off the field, which makes him in a happy place on the field. This is a really big game for United because you can say about they've won the last 8 at home. They've played Charlton, Everton, Bournemouth, Forest, Burnley. I mean, Wolves away is a difficult game, but this now is a different level. For me, City are, and we'll see whether they can win the title or not, but I think they're the best team in the world personally. They've got City, they've got Arsenal, they've got Barca a couple of times in January and February. This period now will tell us exactly where United are. But in terms of the building blocks of what he's done, they were on the floor at the start of the season, and 6-3 flattered United, not City. So I'm fascinated to watch this game and to see whether they can live to City standards.
He's got that mentality now flowing around Old Trafford that they go into every game believing they can win it. And this is a really good test. This is the ultimate test against the best team in the league.
Okay, so we've done very well in bigging up Manchester United and telling everybody how well that Erik Ten Hag has done and how competitive they could possibly be on Saturday. But maybe we've forgotten a couple of things. First of all, Erling Haaland plays for Manchester City, and he's going to have a point to prove. And also, Pep Guardiola is in charge of Manchester City, and they do look strong at this moment in time, and especially so with the amount of squad depth. I mean, they played Chelsea on Thursday night. I mentioned it in the last podcast that we did. Chelsea were bringing on youngsters under the age of 21, and Manchester City were bringing on Jack Grealish and Riyad Mahrez to win the game, Scott. They've got a huge amount of talent.
They certainly have, and I'm interested to... Pep Guardiola almost sounded like, one of those sort of baddies on a Bond movie. I've got a ridiculous plan for United. It's you should have a
Sometimes he does do that, though. He does do the ridiculous plan. All of a sudden, he starts, I know what I'll do. I'll play Edison on the left-hand side of a midfield four or something.
I'll play no holding midfielder in a Champions League final.
Yeah, crackers. Anything's possible, but they do always seem to score goals, don't they? I mean, if you go back over the course of the last season and a half, they've only failed to score in 2 away games in the league since they were beaten on the opening day of last season against Tottenham Hotspur.
The bottom line is, and we're all still kind of saying City to win the title, although, the longer that Arsenal do this, and it's going to be fascinating the month that Arsenal's got, and then they've got City as well in February. But we still fancy City. This, for me, will tell us about United, this game. I think this is a game where even if City do draw, you still wouldn't say they're out of the title race by any stretch of the imagination. But if United draw, or even if they win and they go 1 point behind City, wow, suddenly we are saying United are back in the game and what the job that Ten Hag has done. So for me, this is a massive test for United. If they get through it by not being defeated or even winning, they're back in the game, just like Rashford's back in the game.
That's live on talkSPORT 12:30 on Saturday, and we've massaged a few egos when previewing Manchester United versus Manchester City. We'll bring a few down to earth now. Everton versus Southampton is live on talkSPORT 2 on Saturday at 3 o'clock. It's being billed as El Sacico, 2 of the most under-pressure managers in the league, Lampard and Nathan Jones. Will either of them last the season, Matt?
Good question. It's a great week for the derbies, but it's also a great week at the bottom end of the Premier League. I think six of the bottom 8 play each other, so that's going to be fascinating to see who comes out on top in those. And Everton, Southampton, Forest, Leicester, and Wolves, West Ham. So there's 5 points separating 13th to 20. At the bottom of the table, and so it's really fascinating to see where this one goes. There's so much pressure on Frank Lampard. Well, actually, it's probably more pressure on the board at Everton than there is Frank Lampard. I think Frank Lampard's got a little bit of credit in the bank at Everton. What I would say about Everton is, I think the players are fighting for it. Conor Cody said it himself. I think he said we're in a bad place, but we're fighting for the manager, and I think there is that mentality within it. But it looks really difficult for them. This is, a must-win game, isn't it, for Frank Lampard and Everton? It's a must-win game for Southampton, mind, but more so for Everton. The fact that it's at Goodison, the fact that there's going to be the protest planned, the atmosphere is going to be a difficult one for the players to play in. So this is a huge game for them to try and get themselves at that bottom 3 where they currently sit.
What do you expect Southampton to do here? Because they've sort of, the owners have got a lot to answer for. The recruitment policy is bad in the summer. It was a gamble that didn't pay off. Now they're trying to get more experience into the building. Orsic looks like he's going to be available soon enough. And they've got Nathan Jones, who, let's be clear, listen, we've done this before, so no point in saying it again. We all knew they were going to sack Hasenhüttl just before the World Cup. They should have had someone in mind. Nathan Jones, I wouldn't have thought would have been their first choice. But what do they do now, Scott? Because if this continues and the form continues, the form is absolutely dreadful. I know they beat Crystal Palace in the FA Cup, but their league form, and that's where it really is important, is terrible. What do they do? Do they sack him? Do they move on? Do they try something else? Do they admit they made a mistake? Or should they just keep ploughing on and hope that even if they do go down, they can reset and he's the man to bring them back up again?
I thought he spoke really well when he was interviewed after the Palace game in the FA Cup by Sam Ellard, where he sort of said, look, there's a lot of people telling me I don't know what I'm doing. He said, I do. Now, he's obviously going to say that. I think you hate to see the sort of owners coming down to the training ground and seeing how things are, but I would judge it on that. I would somehow either go myself or send some spies and say, what's the feeling at the training ground? Does it look like he's got the respect of the players? Because if he hasn't got the respect of the players, there's no point in him carrying on. But if he has, just like Frank Lampard has the respect of the players, then you have to get behind him. Orsic, I think, would be a good signing. I actually think this is probably the perfect game for Southampton. Look, he's played 4, lost 4 in the league, but he's come off the back of a really good result in the FA Cup, which can be a real release and a relief at the same time, you know, with the FA Cup, that no one really expected him to win there. The Everton, with the protest that's going on, the way that Everton are as a club at the moment, the fact that they're in the bottom 3, which is much more of a surprise than Southampton, if they somehow get an early goal or just sort of dominate or make Everton make mistakes in those first 10, 15 minutes, the fans will turn, and then it makes it even more difficult for the Everton players. So I actually think this is a great opportunity for Southampton and Nathan Jones to go here and get all 3 points.
You were playing for Benfica the last time that Southampton beat Everton by 2-0. The goal scorers Kevin Davis and Matt Letizia. Yes, it was that long ago. They don't have a great record at Goodison Park. Brighton against Liverpool this weekend. Liverpool, they're in a bit of a sticky patch themselves. I don't fancy them away at Brighton, bearing in mind that I went down, Matt, to the Brentford Community Stadium last Monday night and watched them capitulate defensively. Brighton are very well drilled, very well organised, and they've started to score goals as well. Could this be a sticky trip for Jurgen Klopp?
Difficult game. Very difficult game for Liverpool. I like the attitude of Roberto De Zerbi. I like the way he's gone about his business. You know, that was a difficult job taking over from Graham Potter. The work that he'd done, the way he'd implemented his style at the football club, and then to try and come in and continue that success, I thought was a very difficult one to walk into. But his attitude is, he's got this desire, this hunger, this winning mentality that I think is emanating around the club now. When they won at the weekend against Middlesbrough in the FA Cup, the first thing he referenced was the disappointment in the defeat to Charlton in the League Cup. He was still bitter and hurt by that defeat.
Seething.
Absolutely seething, because he's now thinking, yes, finish as high as we can in the Premier League, but he's thinking silverware. He's thinking about winning things. He's thinking about taking Brighton to the very next level, and that's, you know, getting to cup finals, winning things. So I love his attitude. I love the way he's done things at that club. His worry this month might be that Trossard, although he hasn't been in great form since the World Cup, might well be on his way. Looks like Spurs are hugely interested, but this is a really difficult game for Liverpool. Gakpo obviously has been introduced. He's been integrated now into the team. Be interesting to see, you know, where exactly he fits into Jurgen Klopp's plans. I've still got this feeling that Liverpool are going to finish in the top 4. I don't know why. but because I think they've got plenty of quality, but I think they have got plenty of problems as well, particularly in midfield, I think, at Liverpool. But I've still got this nagging feeling that they're going to finish in the top 4.
7 points off the top 4 at the moment. You talked to me about Evan Ferguson, Scott, because you like him a lot, 18 years of age. He looks a real player, doesn't he? I saw him against Everton last midweek. I thought he was absolutely terrific. And I must admit, I looked at him, I looked at his frame, I looked at his build, and I went, 18, are you sure?
Sam, that was the first thing I was going to say. He's 18 going on 28 physically. But what I also really liked about him was there was times where he could have laid the ball off and he didn't. He barged someone out the way, turned and had a shot himself. You know, that's not a kid's mentality. That's a senior pros mentality. And to think that he's 18, I'm not in any way putting him in the Wayne Rooney bracket, not in any way whatsoever. But it was almost that kind of like, are you really that age, both mentally, emotionally and physically? You know, those type of moments. So there's a player there. And in terms of Liverpool, a couple of weeks ago, I was asked by Crookie, do Arsenal just go to Brighton and aim for a draw? And I said, no, they've got this title-winning mentality right now. They need to go for a win. Liverpool, if they come away with a draw for this, I think is a very good result.
Nottingham Forest against Leicester continues derby weekend, East Midlands derby. Leicester City absolutely tore Nottingham Forest a new one live on talkSPORT earlier in the season. That was back in October. But since then, huge credit for Steve Cooper, who's turned Forest's fortunes around. They're not safe by any stretch of the imagination. There's still a very long way to go. But I think I said to you probably about that time, just after I saw them against Liverpool, and I said, you know what? They're going to be okay. By hook or by crook, they are going to dig in. They are going to stay up. Do you think it will happen, Matt?
I think they give themselves a great opportunity. I was at Forest on New Year's Day against Chelsea, and I was talking to Andy Reid, who's obviously on the coaching staff. I played with him at Charlton. But he said that I think they were a little bit naive when they first got into the Premier League. They were a little bit open. They thought they could just, perhaps go at teams as they had done previously. Now, all of a sudden, I think it's a different Forest that we're seeing. And I also think that Steve Cooper has taken time to evaluate lots of signings in the summer, to evaluate his best 11. And I think it's taken him a while to get to that point. Now he has, because you look at the defeat in the FA Cup, he made 11 changes and they got stuffed 4-1. That says to me that he now knows his best 11.
Well, he knows he's not going to use that lot.
Well, not necessarily not going to use them, because that's what a squad's all about. But he knows, obviously, but he knows exactly where his best team is now, and the direction that they're going. So I think that with that in mind, they have given themselves a good chance.
Forest are very strong at home, or stronger at home than they are away. They've beaten Liverpool, West Ham and Crystal Palace there already this season. Taiwo Awoniyi is a real handful up front and can cause anyone a problem. And when Liverpool's defence came to town, they struggled to sort of keep hold of him. They had Van Dijk then. How are Leicester, who are one of the leakier teams in the league, going to handle him, Scott?
Yeah, he's a real physical threat, isn't he? And he can go in behind. And the fact that he was a Liverpool player, albeit not playing for the first team, tells you that he's got something. But in terms of this particular game, I mean, look, you have to say Forest, as bitterly disappointed they would have been to lose to Blackpool, that win against Southampton was absolutely massive. And they've got Leicester, Bournemouth and Leeds their next 3 games. So you ask about whether they'll be safe. I think we'll know a lot after those 3 matches. Leicester, the way they're playing at the moment, again, I think they'll be safe. But I can't say that 100%. And we should not be talking about Leicester in that way. So this is a massive game. Forest at home, not an easy place. And I actually probably would fancy Forest in this one.
Tielemans' future is still up in the air. Lots of fans calling for Vardy to play week in, week out. But should they really be relying on him at this stage of his career? Wolverhampton Wanderers against West Ham United, 2 teams towards the bottom end of the table. Julian Lopetegui has certainly upped the intensity amongst the Wolves players. I thought they played really well for about an hour against Aston Villa the last time that I saw them, but they just ran out of gas. They're still looking for a striker. In fact, Crookie tells us, Matt Holland, that Mikel Antonio is on their radar. Would he solve their problems?
Yeah, I saw that actually. Interesting one, isn't it? Because he's obviously not featuring as much as he'd like to do at West Ham. Handful, puts himself about. Don't know whether he's necessarily the answer to Wolves' problems in front of goal. But I do think that Lopetegui has done a brilliant job since he's arrived at the club. I thought that performance against Liverpool was perhaps the most encouraging since he's arrived. But there's so many teams in the Premier League that are looking for goal scorers, and they're so difficult to find. And January is notoriously difficult to get people through the door. It'd be interesting to see what Antonio would cost. But I wouldn't necessarily say he was the answer to their problems in front of goal. But again, I still feel that Wolves will have enough under this manager, I think, to stay out of trouble. I know they're in the relegation zone now, and the problems are there, but I think they'll get out of it under this manager.
West Ham have lost 6 of their last 9 away games in the league. I mean, that's not a particularly great record, and they're sitting just hovering above the relegation zone on goal difference. Are they in danger of going down?
Look, I was part of the squad that went down with 42 points, so you can never say they'll be 100% safe, and that's why I'm always wary of saying that. But no, West Ham will not go down. I'm not having that at all. And I'm definitely not having Mikel Antonio going to Wolves. Why would David Moyes let him go to a relegation rival when Scamacca hasn't really been on fire anyway? The whole point of bringing in Scamacca was to actually help out Antonio. So you've got 2 strikers, and a lot of West Ham fans want to see the 2 of them playing together, which I think there's more chance of seeing that and a change of system than of Antonio actually being allowed to lead the club. Absolutely no chance. But look, that Leeds draw, I think, was crucial just to stop the rot. They've got the quality. We know that it hasn't been good enough. And I do worry for David Moyes in his future, because it'd be interesting to see what happens. the sale of the London Stadium, 100% after March the 23rd would go to David Sullivan, and I assume David Gold's family as well. So things can change, but no, I think for now David Moyes is safe, and I think West Ham will be fine. In this particular game, though, I agree with Matt. I actually would say that out of the bottom three, Wolves will not go down. They will not go down under Lopetegui. And I'd probably say it's 50-50 out of those two who would be the ones that go down. But I think both of them will be safe. This will be a really good game, this. I'm really looking forward to trying to watch it.
Okay, Brentford versus Bournemouth is 5:30 on Saturday. Tony set to return for the Bees. Still no word on that ban. They were really good without him against Liverpool. Bournemouth, terrible form, struggling since the return. 5 defeats from 5-3 in the Premier League. They are going to struggle. One more huge derby this weekend. We go from Manchester down to London for a mammoth clash between leaders Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs against Arsenal is 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. We'll keep you in touch with it on the Sunday session this week. Let's have a guess what might happen in the first half. Spurs will do nothing, and Arsenal probably will take the lead. Antonio Conte's team have not led at half-time in any of their last 13 competitive matches. That is nothing short of woeful, Matt Holland.
Seen them a couple of times recently. I saw them 3 times recently as well since Christmas. Saw them at Brentford, then saw them at Crystal Palace, and then saw them in the Cup against Portsmouth. And every single game has followed the same pattern, where they were disappointing, poor, slow out the blocks, not getting going, and then second half transformed. The difference maker in all of those has been Harry Kane. I mean, it's ridiculous. His record now, 265 Spurs goals, just one short of Jimmy Greaves' record. That's going to be broken. I mean, what a way to break it if he does it in the North London derby.
In those 13 games in which they have failed to lead at half-time, Antonio Conte's team have won 5, lost 6, and drawn the others. Now, I mean, you could be really kind and say, well, doesn't Antonio Conte usually make a difference at half-time when he's throwing cups of tea around in the dressing room? But ultimately, the other accusation is he's just not well prepared enough for the start of the game. And if you do that against Arsenal, who are in a brilliant run of form, with goals coming from everywhere, it's a real feature of their play that everybody is scoring in that front three, then you've got a serious problem. You could find yourself well out of the game before you get to half-time if you don't start properly, Scott.
Absolutely, Sam. I totally agree with you. And even in the Newcastle game, Arsenal came out and Newcastle were just on the back foot. They're like a boxer on the rope saying, I've got to hang in here and hopefully, get to the bell. Arsenal have been nothing short of sensational this season. I said during the World Cup that the 5 fixtures after the World Cup would tell us exactly where Arsenal would be. They beat West Ham at home when they were 1-0 down at half-time. They went to Brighton, got a victory there. 0-0 against Newcastle. Okay, it's not a win, but they were the better side, and Newcastle were hanging on. But Spurs, Manchester United, City in the Cup, and they've also got City in the league next month. Sorry.
Right.
These games are absolutely crucial. If you're Spurs, you cannot go 1-0 down to this Arsenal side, and they need to be at it from the word go because they will be, Arsenal would be 100 miles an hour. Fascinating game again. You've got to fancy Arsenal, but Spurs at home in these fixtures are very, very good. They don't lose. So it's a difficult one to call.
Yeah, I mean, the way the statistics are pretty stark. I think it's 2014, the last time that they lost at home to Arsenal. But Tottenham's top 4 picture not looking as healthy as it was earlier in the season. 33 points from 18 games. Manchester United above them and have got a game in hand and a 2-point difference on them. If they were to lose this North London derby, that really would cause them a massive issue in terms of qualifying for the top 4. How important was that victory over Crystal Palace to sort of give them a bit of confidence in the league prior to this game, Matt? Because it was a stuttering return from the World Cup for some of Antonio Conte's players.
Yeah, I mean it's massive, isn't it? But because they can't afford to get too far away from the top 4 places. So it was a big one. This is an even bigger one. Obviously, the North London derby against your fiercest rivals, and particularly where they are in the league as well. So Spurs would want nothing more than to try and put a dent in their title hopes by getting a victory. I think this is a really interesting month from Arsenal's perspective as well, because I think the January transfer window, I know there's been talk about Mudryk coming in for Arsenal, and I do think they need reinforcements. I do think they need help. I think the Oxford game would suggest that as well. That perhaps the bench, when you look at Arsenal's bench, it isn't as strong as some others in the Premier League, and so I think reinforcements are needed. But there's also that difficult balancing act as well of upsetting the equilibrium of that dressing room and where they are at the moment. So bringing in the right characters into that dressing room is going to be absolutely vital for Mikel Arteta. There's a really good atmosphere about the group, isn't there, at the moment? In that dressing room, it just looks so harmonious. The players are on the same wavelength, they're enjoying it, the smile on their faces, they're playing at an intensity and a tempo, and it's a really good atmosphere at Arsenal. So it's important that Mikel Arteta, yes, he'll want bodies in the building, but he's got to get the right personnel into that building as well.
A quick word, Scott, on Patrick Vieira and the job that he's doing at Crystal Palace. I mean, last year, he did very well, I thought, to turn the dressing room round, the style of football round, and still maintain Crystal Palace in the Premier League. Obviously, they're much better to watch under him than they were under Roy Hodgson. But he seems to have hit a bit of a brick wall. I mean, they were thumped by Spurs in the last Premier League outing. They were beaten at home to Southampton. Yeah, that happened in the FA Cup. So what does he do, and how much pressure is he going to be under?
Well, there was that Fulham result as well, wasn't there? Losing 3-0 at home to them. So I don't think it's been a very enjoyable post-World Cup for Patrick Vieira, but I like him, Sam, and I'm not someone... why I don't always want to make predictions in terms of who's going down and who's getting the top 4, because on a week-by-week basis, things change. But in terms of managers, I like him a lot. You know, I think he's one of those where he's learning all the time, but also if you give him a better squad with more of a depth, I think, you know, he'll do even better. I can see him being Arsenal's next manager, you know, whenever that might be. Honestly, I think he likes talented players to play. You know, the fact that he puts Everese in almost as a central midfielder, number 8, tells me that he trusts his talented youngsters. And he wants his players to go forward. Now, you with all due respect, every year the Palace are in the Premier League is still very much a bonus.
Yeah, I made a mistake there, didn't I? Trying to ask a unbiased opinion on Crystal Palace from a Charlton man.
No.
Outrageous. I should have known.
Palace fans.
Barbs in there.
If Palace fans aren't happy, just look at Charlton. That's what I would say. Just look at Charlton and be careful what you wish for.
We spoke about this last night, and you may have heard it on the program. Actually, you know, be careful what you wish for, because this is Charlton were a club where Alan Kirbishley seemed to be too boring and, you know, just not really having too much ambition. They always finished 10th or 11th in the Premier League, and that wasn't good enough. I think they'd bite your right arm off for that sort of stability now, bearing in mind the ownership problems that they've had and the amount of time they've spent in the 3rd tier of English football. Newcastle against Fulham is also this weekend. Fulham and Chelsea playing twice over the weekend. Impressive response from Newcastle midweek to beat Leicester in the Carabao Cup. Thought they were really good. Dan Burns' goal was terrific. The finish from Joel Linton to seal a place in the Carabao Cup semi-finals, absolutely superb for Newcastle United. A quick word on Newcastle, Matt. Are they in the driving seat for the top 4?
They were more than good against Leicester in the Carabao Cup. They could have been 4-0 up inside 10 minutes. They were absolutely brilliant, I thought, in the game. Totally dominated. Should have had the game wrapped up.
He's all right, that Howell, isn't he?
He's not bad. I'll tell you what, I mean, what a place to be now as a Newcastle fan. The recruitment's been great. The coaching has been good. The fanatical support, a semi-final to look forward to. It's a good place right now to be a Newcastle fan, and I think, well, they have to be in the driving seat. I think, you know, the way that they're going about it, and the confidence that must be 18 years since they were in a semi-final of a cup competition, and now they've got one to look forward to. They're absolutely favourites, and this is a tough game because Fulham have gone under the radar a little bit, I think, this season. And look at where they are in the league. People have talked about Brighton, and they've talked about Brentford and what they've done this season, but look where Fulham are in the league, and how well they've done, and how well Mitrovic has done. He'll be back for this game, of course. He misses the Chelsea one,
yeah,
suspended.
I was going to say that's a key one,
and against his former team. That's a very key one, isn't it? Mitrovic back at Newcastle as well. So he's someone they're going to have to keep an eye on. But Isak's back for Newcastle. Bruno Guimaraes, I mean, what a player, by the way. He's got a bit of everything, hasn't he? Just enjoying watching Newcastle play. They were brilliant against Leicester. Play like that, they will beat Fulham comfortably.
Okay, Thursday night we've got live commentary, Fulham against Chelsea. Friday night, Aston Villa against Leeds is live on talkSPORT. Saturday, Manchester United, Manchester City, the Manchester Derby Premier League exclusive, only on talkSPORT. That kicks up at 12:30. Then we'll take you round the grounds with Ray Parler, Chris Awelamo and Adrian Durham from 2:30, whilst we bring you Everton, Southampton, El Sakiko on talkSPORT 2 from 3 o'clock. Scott, thank you very much. Matt, thank you very much. Back soon. Please tell all your friends about the Game Day podcast from talkSPORT.